Hello everybody. With the previous generation V60 Polestar, Volvo had an instant hit on their hand. It was a wonderfully different take on the performance, saloon or estate, and a car that I really admired. However, it was made in only very limited quantities for quite a short period of time, and not long after that, Polestar split off to become its own manufacturer. So many of us were stood there thinking, well, is that the chance of a sporty Volvo ever happening again? Now gone. Well, I'm happy to say no, because the sporty Volvo is back, and we have here today the V60 Polestar Engineered. Engineered is certainly the right word, and up front you have a technological tour de force. Power comes from a combination of this engine and a hybrid drive. Now what's remarkable is that the motor has not just a turbocharger, but a supercharger as well. With 318 horses from the combustion engine and 87 from the hybrid drive, total power output here is 405 bhp. More impressive though is the torque figure, a staggering 494 pound-feet or 670 newton meters combined, about the same as an AMG GT. But that's not the bit that gets me excited. No, what I'm far more interested in is this, because here you have this little gold-plated knob that allows you to adjust the suspension. Yep, this is a car that comes from factory with Öhlins adjustable dampers. That's very Trek. You can play with these to your heart's content, but I'm going to leave it in the factory defaults, which strike a balance between comfort and performance, and hopefully should work pretty well on my local roads. Price has risen quite a bit too since the last car. This is now 52 and a bit thousand pounds as standard, and the old Polestar for your money gave you everything. This one still has options you can specify, and that means that this car as tested is going to be closer to 60,000 pounds than it is to 50. I'd love to be able to tell you the exact price of it, only Volvo didn't provide me with that. I can tell you some of the things that are not standard. This crystal white paint, these 20-inch alloys, which look almost exactly the same as the 19s, and so I would just go with the 19s, this panoramic roof, and a load of stuff on the interior. There aren't masses of things to specify, and in fact I've currently got a Golf GTR in the driveway too, and that probably has more in terms of options, but it's a little bit sad to see Polestar kind of going away from how they used to do things. I suppose it's necessary with this being now a series production car, but it is a shame really. It means this isn't quite as good value as the old car. Anybody spending the thick end of 60 grand on a daily driver is going to expect a fairly premium interior. And here the Volvo is a mixed bag. You've got some really nice touches like these seats. They look great, and in Volvo tradition, they feel great too. These are absolutely superb. Some of the dials and things down here are really nice. I love the little piece you turn to start and stop the engine. The steering wheel is nice in the hand, although I really don't like these sort of glassy buttons that just attract fingerprints. Same goes for the screen up here. It looks nice and neat and is certainly a lot more modern than the old V60. It's essentially a shrunken version of what you get in the V90, but it can be a little bit infuriating. And for a company which is so safety obsessed, burying so many functions on a touch screen seems just a little bit daft, but then everybody else is doing it, so I suppose Volvo don't really care. This virtual cockpit here too seems a touch disappointing, because like many manufacturers, all Volvo have really done is recreate the old dials that you used to get, and there's nothing really this screen offers that you couldn't get in anything about 5 or 6 years ago. They still haven't understood the flexibility and power you can have with a setup like this, and it's a shame to see really. I'd like more effort to be put into this. You've got the Bowers & Wilkins sound system. In the Polestar it's actually slightly cheaper than in other cars, so it's about £1,600–1,700, and unfortunately it's not very good, despite having all these crazy modes, like being able to tell it that you want the car to sound like a concert hall in Sweden. It's just not very good. In fact, I just gave back a VW Arteon, and the standard stereo in that wasn't really that much worse than this one. When you've got a great big beautiful tweeter in the centre of the dash, you really expect a premium sound experience, and this car does not deliver. It's also very disappointing to see that Volvo has stuck with the old Ford switches. I don't really understand the logic of a manufacturer that changes nearly everything about a car, really tries to break with the past, and still leaves one of the main things you're ever going to touch as a driver in this car as the old thing. Why would you do that? That's just absolutely bizarre. Overall, I think most Merc S-Class, E-Class or BMW 5 Series owners are not really going to be blown away by this cabin, but it certainly feels a step up over, say, your Fords and Vauxhalls of the world. Even compared to my beloved Kia, I'd say this does feel just a little bit nicer with that edge of Swedish flair about it. So it's a pass for me on the interior. I'm also pleased to report that it is still a proper Volvo, because you have plenty of space for both rear occupants and here a class-leading amount of storage in the boot, more than 500 litres. This is really very good, but of course this isn't just your ordinary V60, it's the V60 Polestar Engineered. So does it drive like a proper car? Volvo is a company that very often seems to be at odds with itself, and this car is a perfect example of that. It's a performance hybrid. I know to some people that might seem like an obvious combination, but to me, it just doesn't. When you turn the car on, you won't even be greeted with any sort of engine noise because it defaults to hybrid mode. In fact, we are currently driving without any form of petrol power at all. It's not exactly quick driven that way, merely 90 horsepower pushing along over 2 tons, but it certainly gets the job done for driving around town and whatnot. It's absolutely fine. When the battery's completely full, you'll get about 20 miles of range. Volvo, I think, are hoping that in the near future, when you have restrictions on combustion engine vehicles in certain cities, that this will be enough to get you wherever you need to go without producing any of that nasty pollution. However, I'm pretty sure very few of you have tuned in to see what a 90 horsepower Volvo V60 is like. You want to know what a 400 horsepower Volvo V60 is like. And so do I. So let's find out. You have constant all-wheel drive, where all the systems are working all the time. Pure eco drive, where the car tries to be as environmentally friendly as it can. Hybrid, which is its everyday setting. Then Polestar Engineered, plus you can configure your own individual setting. I'm just going to put this straight into the Polestar Engineered one. The dash changes layout, the car starts the engine, and she is ready to go. I'm also going to put this 8-speed automatic gearbox, not the ZF, into its sort of manual mode. You have to put it into B mode, which is very confusing because that has a very separate meaning in certain EVs. But anyway, I'm putting it into B, and you pull one of these fairly dainty paddles and you can engage manual. So I'm going to drop down a few cogs and we'll see what she can do. Punch is strong even from low down, and you can feel several steps of power as all the different systems work together and hand over responsibility. But if there were one word which I would use to describe the initial impressions of the V60 Polestar Engineered, it would be solid. This is a car that really does feel hewn from a solid block of granite, and so it should, weighing more than 2 tons. That sadly also means that the 400 horsepower and massive torque of this thing is a little bit blunted, so you wind up with something that is brisk rather than shockingly fast. A 400 horsepower hot hatch would just disappear down a road like this, but this is really supposed to be a sporty daily. There you go, at about 4,500 RPM you get a real second wind, presumably as the turbo really starts to light up. Now, I haven't managed to find too many specifics on how this twin-charge setup works, but traditionally what happens is you'll have a supercharger providing the low-end grunt, and that'll then decouple itself as the turbo finally spools up. Now, whether it's the way here, I don't know. Annoyingly, it does also change up for you if you hit the red line. I'm not sure if there's a way to stop it doing that. Actually makes quite a nice noise, I have to say. Like I mentioned, I've also got the Golf GTI on test at the moment, and this sounds a lot nicer than that. More classic twin cam 4-cylinder, I'd say. It's probably all artificial, but I honestly don't care. It's a very, very nice car to drive, and this Öhlins suspension is absolutely spectacular. Yes, at low speeds it can be a little bit fidgety, sometimes even perhaps a bit too firm, but it is adjustable to fix that very problem, and as a balanced setting, I'd say this is pretty much about bang on. It doesn't quite float down the road like the old V60 did, but I'm sure if you change it around, maybe it does. I was hoping this car might have double wishbones all round or a nice fancy multi-link rear, and indeed it's got the double wishbones up front, but the rear setup is perhaps a little bit more basic. Doesn't feel like it though. This certainly seems to be a car which is very happy being pushed down the road at some considerable speed. Visibility is good too, if not excellent. You've got a fairly chunky B-pillar here which does obstruct you for your lifesavers. However, the cabin does feel fairly light and airy thanks to the panoramic sunroof. Rear visibility can also be compromised if you haven't properly put down the little luggage net. There's a couple of settings for it where it can hook itself up manually, and it won't put itself down. You have to do that. So most times I've got in this car, you look out the back and I've got visibility worse than my Lambo. That's just an annoyance. You'd have thought Volvo would have had a way for the luggage net to sort of vanish itself when you open the boot, but apparently not. The car also, after some time, would appear to put itself back into automatic mode once you've engaged manual. If there is a button in here to put it into manual mode permanently, I have yet to find it. Oh, it's situations like this where I wish this car didn't have the 20s on. Honestly, I do not know why you'd spec 20s on this car. Part of the V60's thing over the BMW Merc equivalents has always been that it rode really quite well, and putting 20s on just ruins it. You don't even change the look of the car. I mean, have a look, see what I mean, go online. The 19s and 20s look almost identical, so I'd just leave the 19s on there. Thanks to the hybrid system, the supercharger and everything else going on, this car's got real immediate shove from next to nothing. I mean, I'm going to put this car into 5th gear, we're doing 40 miles an hour, less than 2,000 RPM. It's there. Bang, instant response. That's fabulous. I really like that. I was beginning to worry that such a response would have just gone away in this age of turbocharged engines, but nope, the hybrid system is actually doing its job nicely here, which is good because it then feels to me like it's genuinely adding to the experience and not just creating a load of unnecessary weight for the car to drag around. In all honesty, changing gear in this car does sometimes feel a little bit pointless because it feels like it pulls just as hard at 2,000 RPM as it does at 5. And the gearbox is not very responsive. Allow me to demonstrate. So we're in the Polestar mode as well. So change down, there's the gear, and changing up, nice fast upshift. Yeah, like it's brisk, but it's no quicker than, say, some of the old 6-speed ZFs that I've used. It's a far cry from even the modern 8-speed. But in truth, the ridiculous spread of torque in the car means that doesn't really impede your progress. What I absolutely love is the steering feel in this thing. It's got a real genuine heft to it, but it doesn't feel to me like unnecessary weight. Now, when you do start to push on in a corner, the steering can go a little bit light, which is very unfortunate because that's the moment when you really want it to kind of weight up so you can feel absolutely everything that's going on. Most of the time, this car's got a real sort of chunkiness to the wheel, and so for it to go away at those important moments is disappointing. The overall impression, though, is still one of stability and security, and it means you can really push on in this thing. It is a shame that the only choice of interior spec for the Polestar Engineered is this fairly somber dark black with spats of grey and white in it. You've got these yellowy or gold seat belts to try and lift it, but it does feel like a bit of a half measure. And for the price being paid, I would expect perhaps just a little bit more in here in terms of upmarket materials. You know, why is this not Alcantara? Why is this not leather, etc., etc.? The gear lever here is nice enough, although a bit frustrating to use because you tend to need a double press to do most things. So, for example, if you want to reverse, most cars, what you do, you just come to a stop, you push it all the way forwards and you'd be done. But no, here you got to do it twice, and then same again to carry on going forwards, press twice. I suppose you get used to it, but when that's not the way that everybody else does it, it is a little bit frustrating. I will confess that these forward window switches are really giving me a headache. Everything else in here pretty much feels fairly new. Can't recall if these indicator stalks are the same as the old car. They're very funny looking things, but they work well enough. They're okay, they're nice. They're not obviously Ford. But this has appeared in loads of Astons, Jags, all sorts. Why they're hanging on to this? This is also a 15-year-old, at least, piece of kit. So here we are in one of the local villages, and this is where you find the suspension can be just a little bit jittery. It's not crashy, not anything like that, but it can just be a touch bouncy. The car needs either some more weight in it or a little bit more pace to really feel at ease. The seats though, I must reserve special praise for. I mean, they are really, truly excellent. Lots of adjustability in them, but there's something about Volvo seats. You sit in them and they're just right. It's one of those things. All companies have that hallmark thing that they tend to get absolutely right, and Volvo, their seats, they're wonderful. In fairness, Volvo's old parent company, Ford, also has a tendency for pretty good seats, but these are particularly good. You find also some other oddities in the interior, like for example, this little centre cubby hole you lift up and you expect to see loads of storage. In fact, you've got next to none. You do have some cup holders here, that's nice enough. And it's a simply and elegantly laid out thing. It's nowhere near as infuriating as, say, the new Mark 8 Golf, although I do wish that climate control stuff was physical switches. I will keep moaning about that until manufacturers put them back. Sorry, but not sorry. Now, pulling away from a standstill, nice and easy. And that's not something that's always the case with modern cars, particularly turbocharged ones with DCT gearboxes. The VW Arteon that I recently had as a good example, that was a car that when it was happy was fine, but you could catch it out very easily. That turbo diesel and DCT weren't always the happiest couple. This though, whenever you put your foot down, it's always got something to respond with, and it's got quite a bit, it must be said. On this kind of road, the Volvo feels way overpowered. It's got plenty of shove. Now, it's not actually too difficult to place. It's not a massive car, which means it's not intimidating, but it isn't small either. They've actually repaved some of this road too, which means it's a little bit smoother than it was, but it's still a fairly demanding test of a car. And I've got to say, this thing is handling it absolutely brilliantly. Now, us road testers, we often don't really live in the real world, it would seem, because we have this glorious existence where manufacturers just dump cars on our driveway for a week and take them back, and that's really it. We don't really have to worry about paying for them or any of that sort of stuff. And so it's very easy to overlook that small issue of this car costing the best part of 60 grand. In truth, I think this is a car that probably will appeal to somebody who liked the old V60, because it's always going to be that slightly niche, weird kind of thing. It's absolutely tragic that you can't get this in Rebel Blue. Why they've done that, I do not know. If anything, I'd like Volvo to have limited the Rebel Blue to just the Polestar products. That would mark them out as being a little bit more special again, but hey ho. In fact, the only colours you can get for this are quite drab, and that's a shame, because I think the sort of person that's going to buy one of these, probably quite a cool guy who doesn't really want the classic BMW or Mercedes. That sort of person I'd probably have a very good conversation with, because we probably think alike. In terms of a daily driver for me, this car's just far too much money. It's about double my maximum budget, so it just can't be done. I would consider one of the old V60s, but their infotainment is annoyingly old-fashioned, and the last time I checked, there wasn't actually a single one for sale in the country. So that kind of puts that out of the running. I don't know if Volvo are really the sort of company that does discounts, but if you could knock a little bit of money off this and get it for closer to 50 grand in this spec rather than 60, I'd say it certainly is a car worth considering. Don't worry about the fact it's a 2-litre engine, because it doesn't perform like one. This is a really impressive car. I like the way that it rides. I like the way that it looks. It's a very pretty thing. And it definitely has all the things you would want from a Volvo. Lots and lots of safety systems, plenty of space. Unfortunately, I have this car for a week, and normally I'd like to do the review closer to the end of it. But this is day 2 with the Polestar, and this is apparently the nicest day we're gonna get. So I've had to do things a little bit ahead of schedule. That being said, I think I've fairly got the measure of this car, and from me, it's a tentative. Don't just go out there and buy it, but do try it. So thanks for watching. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.